The fact is, we're looking at, you can have the Ukrainians, the Russians, and clearly the Americans at the table talking, but we've got to have specifics to get to a point. President Trump has been very, very clear. He said this on the very first time he went to the United Nations and the UN General Assembly, and he talked about, if you go back and you look at his talk, he talked about the importance of national sovereignty. Look at his speech. And he said, if you fight for your sovereignty, we will be with you. Okay, he has said that, and he's never abandoned that. So what we've got to figure out is what does this look like?
So the Europeans, who have provided as much or more support than the Americans in this process, you don't think should be at the table directly. You think it should be two protagonists.
I said I'm a school of realism. I think that's not going to happen. But I said that's one of the reasons I'm here talking to people. One of the reasons we're going out, we're doing it, to making sure that their positions are well known, that when we go into these positions, they're well stated. Now, that may be great, like fingers on a chalkboard. That may grate a little bit, but I'm telling you something that's really quite honest. So if you, part of the problem that we looked at when you looked at Minsk too, there was a lot of people at the table that really had no ability to execute some type of peace process, and it failed miserably. So we're not going to go down that path.
3 months in ammunition, what the whole of NATO, 20 times bigger than Russia in its overall size of the economy, is producing. And we are one family. There is an absolute commitment of the US, including this administration, to NATO, but also an expectation that on the European side we have to step up, we have to spend more. And they are right. We are not spending enough.
If we had European troops in some shape or form
on Ukraine, there's a clear common understanding and commitment that we have to make sure that Ukraine is in the best possible place during the peace talks. That means continuing the training in Ukraine, continuing all the weapon supplies into Ukraine, but also that the outcome of peace talks has to be that Ukraine is a country which will never again be challenged by the Russians, by Vladimir Putin. It has to be an enduring, a lasting peace. There is absolute, Americans and Europeans, we are absolutely in agreement on this.
10 minutes left. Can I look around and...
This minerals agreement between the United States and Ukraine is a game changer, because President Trump can go to the American people and say Ukraine's not a burden, it's a benefit. They're sitting on top of $1 trillion worth of minerals that all of us can benefit from by aligning with the West. I told President Trump, it may be the old Soviet Union, it may be the Russian Empire, but I do know he's going after the money. Don't let him steal what Ukraine has to enrich himself, because that's like defunding the police. So if this minerals agreement happens, it's a nightmare for Putin, because we have something to defend that we didn't have before. So you better be pulling for this minerals agreement.
Asking a question to the Secretary General. What happened over the last 72 hours?
I'm all for Ukraine being in NATO, but it's up to the members of NATO. I don't want to take off their potential of getting into NATO, but I'm not so sure the market will bear they go into NATO right now. I'm just being honest with you. But here's what I think we could sell. If you ever do this again, Putin, if you ever have a military incursion into Ukraine again, that will trigger automatic admission into NATO by Ukraine. We should have done that in 2014.
Senator Graham has been...
I think if we get Ukraine right, that's the biggest thing we could do to help Taiwan of anything else. If we spend more now on the mutual defense of NATO nations, that will be seen by Xi as a warning sign that we're not going to take it anymore. I'm tired of worrying about being provocative to bad guys. I want them to fear us. If you don't fear Donald Trump, you're a little bit crazy.
The Munich Security Conference is the audience participation and the...
Everything that we have noticed here in Munich a few days ago, that we saw in Villach yesterday, this is a very big political space for parties who want to exploit it. At the same time, many of those parties, actually, when you look at their foreign policy narratives, are full of understanding for Moscow. It's almost horizontal. Here and there an exception, but this is a signal.
Have been writing. If you were to analyze, based on the last couple of days, whether we're... The first phase is the pre-negotiation. And this is the moment when we need to rearm Ukraine and put maximum pressure on Russia, which means sanctions, which means frozen assets, so that Ukraine begins these negotiations from a position of strength. And this is also the moment, and I think the Americans are absolutely spot on this, when we start looking at interim security arrangements in Ukraine. And go back and really look through the history of this. It was before I was born. I've heard from a lot of senators here during this week an excellent idea. And the idea is that if Russia ever were to attack Ukraine again, that's when NATO membership would materialize and NATO would come back in. That is the ultimate backstop and deterrent for the situation. So these we have here on the stage four of the more resolute members, I would argue, of NATO.